Hi everyone, welcome to the Saath podcast, ASR's newest initiative where we talk about substance use disorders within the context of the Punjabi community.
Through inviting mental health experts, researchers, community members, and those with lived experiences, we discuss everything from the history of addiction to the lived realities of Punjabi families alongside providing relevant resources.
We are your hosts. I'm Ravia. I'm a community organizer and researcher from Edmonton.
I'm Manvinder, a social work PhD student from Winnipeg.
I'm Harleen, and I'm a medical student and anthropologist from Indiana.
I'm Harpreet. I'm a clinical researcher and an epidemiologist from Toronto. Thanks for joining us, and let's start the conversation.
Welcome to the Saath podcast. Today, we are based in Edmonton, or Amiskwachi, Waskahagan, on Treaty 6 territory. We are sitting in the Stanley Milner Library recording this podcast for you. And today we have the wonderful joy of speaking with Baneet and Ankur. So both Baneet and Ankur have worked with an outpatient program catered towards South Asian communities and addictions in Edmonton in their capacities as a social worker and a registered nurse. But first, we'll talk a little bit about yourself and introducing yourself. So welcome, Baneet and Ankur.
Hi everyone, my name is Ankur and I'm a registered social worker. I've been working in the field for about 7 years now, and my career has spanned over all kinds of areas of social work, so disability services, children's services, individuals fleeing domestic violence and abuse, addictions and mental health, criminal justice, and right now I work in forensics, but my other most recent experience was working as an addictions counselor with a South Asian pilot program. And I really just got to see firsthand what our community really struggles with. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that over this podcast. So yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ankur. And hi, Baneet.
Hello, everyone. My name is Baneet, and I'm a registered nurse that has been working with mental health and addictions for a little over 8 years now. My background primarily consists of working in inpatient adult psychiatry in a hospital setting. And then recently I was part of a 2-year program that was catered to South Asians struggling with addictions. As well, recently I completed a master's in global mental health, which again was focused on mental health and addictions. And then, we'll be talking more about addiction through the course of this podcast, and I'm looking forward to that.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think those introductions give us just the context of where you're coming from, what your worlds are, and helps us situate us in our city, and also what are the contexts we're talking about today. So, and I think this is a question that we kind of talked about before, but what does a social worker do in the field of addictions?
So that's a really broad question. Usually our work spans assessment, treatment planning, advocacy, education, support, collaboration with the rest of the team, understanding the individual's biopsychosocial, physical, psychological, social, and environmental factors that contribute to addiction. They might need help with housing, finances, depending on where they live, right? Because I've also worked with some clients who live in rural areas where they may not have as much of support and services. So how can we help them overcome those barriers, right? Mm-hmm. Things like that. If we identify that they need therapy, counseling, then, making those referrals. If there's anything that I know I can't help with in my scope of practice, then, making sure I'm guiding them towards the right direction.
Perfect.
And things like that.
I think that's really good understanding because, I feel like a social worker does a lot of that, building bridges between the medical team that's working on the psychobiological parts of it, and then you bring in that social part of it, of that holistic care. So thank you for sharing that. And then for Baneet, what does a nurse do in the field of addictions?
Yeah, so I guess it varies from setting to setting. I'll just speak from my experience working with the program that I was working with. Basically, my role was doing the initial assessments, collecting the background history, so things like their substance use history, mental health history, medical history, as well as any background, family history. As well, a lot of the people that were obviously coming in were for substance use, so we'd be assessing for any withdrawal symptoms related to the substance use, taking their vital signs before they go on and see the psychiatrist or the doctor. From there on, once you get started on treatment, I'd be just doing the follow-up, so whether it be over the phone or in person, just to see how they're doing with their medications or treatment, if they have any questions. And then as well, I would be kind of connecting them with more appropriate resources if needed, helping them fill out like residential treatment applications, helping with them like finances, housing, things like that, which were some roles that kind of overlapped with the social worker role as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so in the program you were working in, who were the other kind of people that were working on your team to support the people that came into the clinic?
Yeah, so we had like doctors, psychiatrists, they'd be doing like their assessments and prescribing the medication treatment. In addition to that, we did have another addictions counselor working with us and a community support worker. So I guess we'll talk about a little bit about what the role of the community support worker was. Basically, they would help out with kind of just like if people didn't have transportation or in need of things like an ID or needing like an application filled out. So they'd kind of jump in and help out with those types of things. Any other community resources they might need help with, like connecting to the food bank, Hope Mission. Yeah, basically, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so there will be times when if we ever have to meet with a family in their home environment at their house, right, then we would always go together, especially for those like family meetings. So honestly, we all just work together. Let me just put it that way. That's what Saath means too, right? So
Yeah, Saath, being together. And there is that, what we talked about earlier, maybe, I don't know if it was recorded, but was the aspect of like community and family being huge when we talk about addiction or mental health resources in the South Asian community in general.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for that overview of the program you're working in and like the space you're coming in from. And I guess what we have here is, what did you learn during the time of this program that you didn't know before? What are some things you encountered? Thinking of unexpected things.
I think just things I found like surprising or I guess eye-opening. Obviously, we know like substance use is a common issue in the community, but I was surprised at just the extent of it. A lot of times it's just, you know, kept like hush hush. People don't talk about it as well. Like, you know, when you think of substance use, you think of alcohol a lot. You don't really think about the other substances. So I was quite like surprised by the amount of opioid use that was prevalent in the community. Yeah, and then I think just like help seeking, even though there is stigma, the amount of people still coming in to seek help was definitely a lot more than I expected.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, there is stigma on one end, but at the same time, like, I feel like people are becoming more, I guess, inclined to seeking help. Yeah.
I actually totally agree with what Baneet just said. The reason it was eye-opening for me was because, I mean, I've always known that, yes, our community struggles with addictions, there are mental health concerns and things like that. But when you firsthand work with that community and see how culture plays a huge role, how family dynamics play a huge role, I think that was just really opening for me. And one more thing is how overdose is not just specific or unique to other communities, but working with South Asian communities also reaffirmed that. And I'm not talking about overdoses happening every day. Obviously that didn't happen, but every once in a while, it was just really like something that I personally struggle to make peace with as well, just like really hard.
Thank you so much for those insightful answers. I guess for our community, what does opiate use look like? And what does it mean when you say that?
Yeah, I guess it could be a variety of different things. Speaking of more so like talking specifically to this population, in Punjabi, I guess it's a lot of things like what you would call dode, feem, bookie, or you see that commonly. It can also include things like prescription medication like morphine, Tylenol 3. You're seeing fentanyl quite a bit as well. So that is definitely an opiate-containing substance. And then what I was quite shocked about and I didn't know about before was another, I guess, opioid-containing substance that I was unaware of before I started working with the program was Gamni, or they're called Gamni tablets. They're actually marketed as like an Ayurvedic solution for erectile dysfunction or sexual dysfunction, but they actually contain opioids, and a lot of people actually start taking them just to work longer hours. So you see it more so in people working in like hard labor jobs that require working long hours, require a lot of energy and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people are unaware of that, the fact that there are opioids in it, and you know, they start taking them, and then then it becomes like,
It is hard. Like, I think that's another thing that we have talked about previously on this podcast is like, once you're starting to take opiates, your body biologically craves them. It's
exactly.
It's almost, would you say it's impossible to go off of opiates without help, or is it just very very difficult?
It becomes very difficult,
yeah,
because that's what addiction is. So yeah, you start taking them and then it's hard to not take them anymore.
And maybe people don't know about that when they start taking them, especially when you think of Ayurvedic help, you think natural, and like technically poppies dode tea is coming from a plant, it's natural, but everything is a chemical.
Exactly.
So they react with our brains in ways that I wouldn't understand, but you both probably do more than me.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Thank you. Amazing. So I guess, what we were talking about was like, were any of your assumptions challenged? Like maybe you came into your positions with assumptions about the South Asian community or mental health and addiction. Were any of those challenged? Or what were your assumptions? That's the first one, hey?
So I really just had one assumption, and my biggest assumption was that, South Asian communities are becoming more progressive now. So maybe, we also live on the West, right? We don't live in our home country.
Yeah.
So maybe we're not exposed to as many social issues in terms of addictions and mental health. Because I have been under the impression that there is more awareness on addictions and mental health right now. Maybe things are not as bad here in the West, but our community is still struggling. So just walking in with that mindset and learning just so much more about what our community struggles with in terms of at a societal level, I think like that was the only assumption that was challenged.
Yeah, like so you came in with like, oh, things are not that bad, and then you walked in, you're like, oh no, they are as bad as they maybe were back in wherever home was for the population you were working with.
Yes.
And then here you're like, oh no, it's just as bad here. What the heck? Like,
it's just as bad here. And I feel like people tend to hide those issues here even more because we obviously don't want to show it to the rest of our community that we're struggling, right? Because again, at the end of the day, it's all about family honor, what the rest of the society thinks about us, and things like that. So
yeah, exactly. Baneet, do you have anything for that?
I think for me, it was primarily like, obviously surrounding these issues, there's a lot of stigma, but I think I was still surprised by the amount of people that are still coming in to seek help. Obviously, it's not where we want to be, and like there's still a lot more awareness that needs to be raised regarding these issues, but I think it's becoming more normalized to like come and seek help. And I think I was just surprised by the number of people that will come in, and despite the stigma around these issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the assumption there was maybe like, oh, these people, or not these people, but like apne log, I'll say apne log, and they're not, they're us, they're our families, will maybe not want to seek help, but you saw more help seeking behaviors than you had initially anticipated.
Exactly.
That's really positive, and kind of like it almost balances both of your answers to our assumptions as like, people living in communities is like, it's really balanced, I think, of the understanding that we see issues in our community and we're like, oh, like, unless it's right in front of you, you might not know how difficult or how prevalent it is, especially because no one talks about it. But then when you have people actually going to seek help and you are going through those motions, well, first you get to see actually what the reality of the community is. And then second, you see the different ways that like healing and maybe the different aspects of like Western care that works and doesn't work. And that's really good.
Yeah, I guess to kind of add to that, I almost wonder if it was because, like they felt safe coming to this like setting where people were speaking the same language. They can have that sense that these people are going to understand because they come from a similar culture, same cultural background, same values and stuff like that. Whereas I think if you're going elsewhere, you're like, let's say going through the emergency, you're more reluctant to kind of share everything. Yeah.
I'm actually curious, like, this is just off the top of my head, like, do you think there being apne people in the clinic could have been a deterrent for some people, being like, oh, what if they know someone I know and they know I'm struggling? Like, did you ever experience that?
I think I like in the back of my mind, like that thought did cross my mind, but I think when I was there, like I didn't feel like that at all. Yeah.
What about you, Ankur? Did you?
Yeah, so when I work with some clients, they knew other people who personally didn't want to seek help or didn't want to come to the clinic because they might know someone who either works here or might be someone else from the community that might have come to the clinic to seek help themselves, right? So I've heard it from others, but personally didn't experience it myself.
So overall, we can say that like maybe, yeah, like having a familiar face, having someone from the community is much more helpful than it is a deterrent, even if people from your community are in the office, from what we have experienced in this very small context. So this is not generalizable, right? And this isn't medical advice. Next, I'll just ask, like, what did you see in the clinic generally?
Yeah, I think generally the population you saw were males, but again, like I think substance use varied from generation to generation. So you'd see like variations between first generation immigrants versus second generation immigrants, just like choice of substance, for example. I think more so in the second generation, you noticed a lot more just like alcohol use. When it came to opioid use, there's a lot more prescription opioids. So like things like hydromorphone, morphine, things like that, as well as other substances like cocaine, marijuana. Versus first generation, I would say it was more, I guess, a mix of alcohol, opioids. The older generation, you'd see a lot more opioids, such as like, I guess, like anything you'd classifies like a female nache, I guess. Yeah.
Uncle drugs.
Yeah, pretty much. And then a lot of the younger first generation immigrants, you'd surprisingly, it was a lot of opioids, but it was more so you'd see a lot of like fentanyl use. A lot of times they were using like, let's say, heroin, again, feme from back home. You come here and unfortunately we don't even have heroin anymore. Everything that's considered heroin is pretty much fentanyl, especially in Alberta. So they don't know that. So you see a lot of people using fentanyl, which is scary. Yeah, considering the amount of overdoses we're seeing in Alberta and Canada as a whole. Yeah.
So we see like a difference between generations of migrants that are coming. So people that are first generation, but maybe of an older age demographic, like 50 plus, would you say? They have a different kind of like general, you see a different type of use. And then you see younger migrants experiencing a different type of like choices, and then people who are born here. And that, I think that's a really good point, because I think when people try to say things about a community, they'll be like, oh, the South Asian community has this issue. And that's not true. Everything is so contextualized and like important to like say what the like crux of the issue is. Yeah. But I think that's a good piece to say about like migration. Did you want to share anything on that, or?
Sure. So from my perspective, it's not just that I saw it, but mostly the reasons why South Asian community members generally slipped into substance use. So this is again just based on my own observation and experience. I don't mean to generalize anything, but most of the South Asian community members, right, leave their home country, migrate to Canada, sometimes education, employment opportunities, right? But generally they come from a huge family, a joint family, right, where you're eating with your family members, you're drinking tea in the morning. Like it's such a community that we have back home, right? So coming here, doing everything all by yourself, you're not sitting with anybody, you don't when you come home from work, like who do you come home to, right? That's why I felt like sometimes depression, loneliness also played a huge role, just because that's not something they were used to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like even thinking of when like in general in like Western society, you say, oh, like when a kid will move out from like their parents' house and go to university, they gain like a freshman 15, which is, oh, they're adjusting because they're lonely and they're stressed out. But the amount of stress on, let's say, an international student or a person who's coming here for a job experiences is even greater because they're working in different systems, different languages, different like types of people, learning how to like say things, and even navigating everything is just, it's just so much more. And I think, yeah, like having that grace for your community and understanding like, hey, there's actually like huge changes these people are experiencing. It's okay when, you know, like someone that's a white kid going to university experiences adversity and has to cope with it by maybe eating more, or I don't know. Yeah. But like when it's a person from our community, it's, I mean, obviously there's dangers here, but like, how do we have grace for that person as well? Because it is like a lot that they're going through.
Yep. And it's just the navigation process that's so difficult, right? Because again, coming from such a huge family to, you know, to a country where there's so much emphasis on individual living, you know, just concepts like self-care, mental health, giving space, privacy, boundaries. Sometimes it will take our South Asian community members years before they learn what it's like living here, adjusting here, right? Depends on your support system, who you have. And for some people who don't really have anyone here, how are they going to learn, right? That's I don't know. I think their transition period sometimes is really frowned upon because they do get judged. So it's, I don't know. It was an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, which only makes it harder when you're trying your best to like fit in, and then people are like, you're doing it wrong, and you're like, it's my first day. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That just really, I feel like, you know, takes a toll on your self-esteem.
Absolutely.
You're trying really hard to adjust. There's so much stress. You're struggling, but you can't really voice it because, again, apne log, what is the rest of the society going to think, right?
Exactly.
Like imagine a son coming here but he can't really tell his mom what he's going through. Yeah. Because you don't want to stress your parents out, right? So that's why. The reason why we don't talk about our problems is because we don't want to stress our parents out. They're already stressed enough that my son, my daughter, whoever has migrated to a different country, they're already stressed about how they are living there, what they're eating, if they're eating often enough, what kind of friends that they have, who they're associating with, right? So, and there's always a fear, you know, is my son or my daughter, against my family member, still going to be close to me? Are they ever going to come back to the home country? So the parents are oscillating and drowning in these thoughts themselves. So whoever has moved here, like, they don't want to stress their parents out. So
exactly,
they don't talk about their problems, right? But again, here in the West, there's a lot of emphasis on communication, talking about your problems. So it is a balance. Sometimes it's a hard balance to strike, I find.
Yeah. And I think actually, like, that's a really good point you bring up, is like the structures that we have up in the West, like you said, like self-care, boundaries, you listed a few things. Those are all things that you need in a Western society, in an individualized society, to like function. Whereas maybe if you're living in like, and again, I'm speaking in generals here, so like if you're living in a communal society, you're able to like have those supports built in. And then once you lose those like built-in supports, it's like really difficult to relearn. And of course, if you're moving as an adult and you're adjusting to so many other things, we can understand how a person will, like you had said earlier, slip into addiction. Like maybe they didn't mean to, maybe they just were having a bad day and tried something once someone offered them. Like, was that something you saw?
Honestly, that's been the story most of the time. They are struggling, they need help, they, you know, find new friends at a university, college, workplace, whatever,
community.
And yeah, right, in general. So they find someone and, oh, let's just try this, you know, it helps you feel better, feelings of euphoria, helps you sleep, right, you know, helps with your depression. And there's especially the word depression and self-diagnosis was really prevalent. So you just feel depressed, okay, maybe let's just try something, right, maybe it will help me.
Tell me more about that, like the prevalence of, like you said, the self-diagnosis and depression. What did that look like? So,
and again, I'm just speaking clinically, but the general understanding of depression is very different from someone being clinically diagnosed with depression, right? So my role was an addictions counselor. So whenever clients came to me, they would always tell me, oh, I'm depressed, right? So now my area of curiosity was, what makes you depressed? Or why did you choose to use that word? Why did you not say sad? Why did you say depressed, right? So that's why because the word depression is so commonly thrown around there, that's naturally what people pick up on. It might be a moment of sadness, or it might be something, maybe they're really like struggling with depression. They just haven't been diagnosed yet, right? It could be anything, but the word itself is just randomly thrown around there, and that's what people tend to pick up on, because that emotion resonates with you in the moment, right? That's why.
Yeah. And I think there's, we always say, like, in Punjabi, like, Punjabi was my first language, but I sometimes find it difficult to express myself. So if I'm using like an English language, like let's say someone born and raised spoke Hindi, Punjabi, Gujarati, whatever, and they are now like trying to speak, emote in English, and you find the word depression, maybe that works. But like what I've encountered like in a few kind of like group spaces is like naming emotions in our languages is really helpful. What do you think about that?
Oh my God, I can totally talk about that.
Yeah.
So I'll just like sort of, personalize this question and explain what happens in my own family here.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have moments of frustration, anxiety. I'm just really low on energy, right? But whenever my parents don't see that I have the most amount of energy, right? My energy levels aren't that high. They will automatically associate that with the word angry. Why are you so angry? I was just calling you for this. Why are you so angry? You don't have to be angry. And I have the hardest time explaining it to them that I'm not angry. My social battery is really low right now. I just came back from work. It's been a long day. I don't have that much energy. So the fact that now my emotion was associated with the word angry, that actually makes me angry.
That's so real.
So, and I'm sure I'm not the only one experiencing that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so like naming our emotions, not knowing maybe what our emotions are, and then like that would be some skills or tools that maybe, did you use those ever in clinic, like in the space to be like, because you were saying you asked those questions. You came here because you say you're depressed. What does that mean? What kind of tools would you use in that context?
So I guess something that I usually fell back on was using the emotion wheel. When someone says sad, it could, there are so many synonyms, right? It could be, sometimes sad can be angry. Sometimes a sad can be actually depressed. Sometimes you just feel so indifferent and you don't really know how to describe your emotions. Sometimes you're just emotionless in the moment, right? You're not the happiest, but you're not the saddest. So I would usually use the feelings wheel circle. That helped for sure. What are your thoughts, Baneet?
I think for me, sometimes like when I was doing like the initial assessments or getting like just a background history from them, a lot of times they would mention I have depression, I have anxiety. I'd, be like, is it formally or clinically diagnosed? And they would say no, like they've just struggled with this like for a while. Obviously there was cases where they had said like, they had been formally diagnosed. So I think a lot of times, you would see like these, I guess, not actual diagnosis, but like them saying like, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling depressed, and this is why they drink or they resorted to substances. So you'd see that commonly
there. So like understanding. So our conversations like so far have been like, okay, like what did you guys do? What did you encounter in clinic? And then we did actually talk about a lot of the underlying issues of why people might be using substances. And then now we're talking about like what happened in the clinic. So maybe we can go into like what was kind of like a traditional progression of care. I don't know, like when people come to, let's say, an emergency room or another place, what did you encounter in that space? I guess not emergency room because you're outpatient, but what role did you play in this outpatient setting that you were in?
I think a lot of times like people coming in would be having withdrawals from the substances. I think like when they do seek help, they realize it's getting pretty bad. It's affecting all different parts of their life. So whether it be their work, their family, other relationships. So I think like they've tried everything, stopping on their own, and then they realize, okay, I can't do this. And then that's when they come in for help. Yeah. I guess for more so like people coming in, or like you did see instances where they did present to the ER, for example. And a lot of times it is like for withdrawals, or they drank too much, or it was an overdose, for example, and then the ER has referred them here to our clinic. And so then they're able to come in and just be stabilized on medication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so in my addictions counselor role, funny enough, the initial question I used to be asked was how long it will take them to recover. And so in their language, what they meant to say was, how long will it take for me to stop drinking, right?
Yeah.
Now, just because you're coming to counseling doesn't mean you'll stop drinking, right? But again, the lack of education on what recovery looks like is, I mean, I don't want to say it's not there, but I'll just be candid, it really wasn't there, at least in my experience.
I don't think it exists. That's why we have this podcast.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. So like people are looking for a timeline, a solution, and they like, I think from my experience of speaking to you and other people is like taking that step to even get help is like, they feel like now I should get better right away. Like that first hurdle is so tall and scary that when they're there, they're like, I'm ready to get better now.
Yeah. And that's why in my first intake session, I would always preface this. And the reason I'm prefacing always is because there really was a lack of education, right? So I would always tell them, the fact that you're here, you recognized there was a problem, you need help, that's a huge deal, right? So obviously giving them the credit for coming all the way to the clinic, because it is really hard to even be self-aware, to just physically go to the clinic yourself and just seek help, right? But at the same time, I would always tell them it will take time, right? And how long it takes depends on you. It always depends on you. So when you come to your counselor, you come to your counselor maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, or once a month. Now that depends on your availability, how often you're willing to come, right? So just seeing a counselor once a month isn't going to do a whole lot of work if we just limit your recovery to that hour-long session, right? But the things that the tools that the resources that we talk about in our counseling sessions and how you apply them outside of the clinic will eventually determine how long it will take you, right? That will determine the timeline. So that's something I really just had to preface because of how often I saw that happening.
Yeah.
And then I think it goes with counseling too. And then a lot of times you get the question where they'd ask, okay, how long do I have to take this medication for? Or can I stop taking it now? I think you'd have to really provide that education that this addiction is an ongoing thing. It's a chronic illness that even if let's say, you are doing well, eventually you do taper down your medication or you stop coming in for counseling, you might be doing good for some time, but there's always going to be that risk of relapsing, or if there is that risk or you're going through a bad time in life, what coping strategies or what coping mechanisms will you have in place during that time? Because there with anything, I always give the example of if you have high blood pressure or diabetes, you're going to be taking medication for a long time because it's a chronic issue. You can't completely get rid of it.
Absolutely.
You can only manage it.
Understanding substance use disorder as a chronic condition is, I think, very new, even for my understanding of addiction. And I've been working in this space for a little bit now, but it's, I think that framing of it really shifted my own personal being it's something that people can work on for it's a lifelong condition.
It's an ongoing thing.
It's a lifelong condition. And expecting it to be I don't know, something that you could take 2 pills and you're better is really difficult, especially since it's so intimately tied to your relationships, your work, your life. And did you have anything else to say on that bit?
I do want to share an example. So I had one client that came for counseling probably twice a month. And I think during his second month, his question was, I've been coming to counseling for a month now. Why am I not getting better? When he questioned me when he was going to get better, my response to him was, if, he's been applying all the counseling tools and resources outside of our sessions, right? When we do safety planning, when we talk about cravings, your coping strategies, have you been utilizing those? And if the answer is no, then you could be going to counseling for 10 years, but not make many changes in your personal life, right? So it's your journey, and you walk your journey. As health professionals, we can walk alongside you, but we can't be hand holding, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of add to that, I think just, giving, like, especially when it came to like family, you'd get a lot of family coming in and be like, oh, like, he's not ready, or like he doesn't want to come in, like he doesn't want to go, like can you do something, or is there like any treatment where we can force him into treatment? And like you'd have to provide that education that like unless they're not ready, there's unfortunately not much we can do. Like we can support them during that time, but have to actually make that decision to like, okay, I want to stop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can give an example of another client whose family member. So the family member actually booked an appointment for the client, and while we were booking the appointment, I asked her, "Are they ready to come? Do they want to come?" She's like, "Yes, they are ready to come." So the next day they did show up. Thankfully, I had an availability. Anyway, so they did show up, but. So it's just the family member going on and on about why they need counseling, right? And then I had to tell her to shut up in a respectful way, and I had to ask the client, "Do you want to be here?" And he said no. And then I had to really educate her. I appreciate your concern, just validate and acknowledge your concerns, but at the same time, if he doesn't want to be here, there's really not much we can do, right? He has to want to be here. So, and this wasn't the first time. This was, to be honest, on so many occasions and ongoing encounter. So, yeah.
Yeah, like the role of family.
Yeah, no, I think that was probably one of the more difficult things. Or like you'd have family members calling, they're like, he's not like doing well again, or he doesn't want to come in for counseling, he doesn't want to take medications, or he takes medications and he stops. Like, what are we supposed to do? Yeah.
So in that context, what did you provide support to the families as well, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so I think we, as part of the program that we were part of, we were actually able to offer counseling for family members of those struggling with addictions. So we'd offer that, like, let's say a wife comes in, she doesn't know how to deal with, the substance use. Like, we were able to refer them to a counselor as well for that extra support, that education. Yeah.
And whenever we had family members that had, like, let's say, transportational barriers, right, our community support worker would also go pick them up, drop them off at the clinic. Then once the counseling session was done, or the treatment was done, or their appointment was done, then she would just drop them back off at their place as well. So we really try to bridge those gaps.
Yeah, for sure. Because like, I think that's one thing that's unique to Edmonton and maybe cities like ours is like, especially in the winter, transit being a huge barrier, going outside of your house. Our city's built for cars. It's really difficult if you're in the suburbs to get to like anywhere. It'll take you a very long time. So there's a bunch of other structural barriers I think that you're bringing up, that you were bridging in the work that you were doing. I want to talk a little bit more about the role of family members, and maybe even like the role of family or community influence, and how did that come up in your work?
I think like the community is like quite supportive. They're really trying to help people that are struggling with this. There's a few times where you just have just random community members bringing in people that weren't even their direct family members, that they just encountered, came across, and be like, okay, you need help. And so they'd actually bring them into the clinic. So it was nice to see that the community is supportive of each other in that way. And then I think, in general, like most of the people that did come in usually came in with a family member. So that's something you not normally see, I think, elsewhere, or like if you're going through any regular hospital. So being able to incorporate them in the treatment, I think, was fairly unique to the program. Yeah.
And like super relevant to the context and people that we're working with, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Absolutely. Ankur, did you encounter or see anything with like community influence, or like people interacting with the community, or generally like?
So in my experience, I found that family is usually the reason again, I don't mean to generalize, but families, usually the reason why people slip into substance use, right? So from an immigration perspective, if someone comes here away from their home country, maybe they slipped into substance use because they're missing their family and they just want to deal with their loneliness, right? Sometimes, again, I don't mean to generalize, but in some South Asian families, there's a lot of dysfunction, negative experiences growing up, two people sort of forced into an arranged marriage and just having to live together for years and years and years, but there's no love, care, respect, intimacy, anything. So those were some clients as well that I, dealt with. They didn't want to be in relationships or their marriages, but how do I just get out? I have no idea, right? Why? Family is, again, the reason, right? So at the end of the day, culture, family, I think those were the biggest factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like basically, yeah, family, there's a lot of family support, but a lot of times it can be also a stressor.
Yeah, it's like, how do you find the balance of finding the people that'll support you, but also like the social obligations you have to like stay with your wife, or I don't know, like I know in South Asian families, like you said, like you will have like a second cousin come live with you because they're living in your city, and then you're like stressed about their well-being. So there's like all these added communal stresses that are added, but that same stress can sometimes be super supportive. I guess my question from that is like, did you see, how there's that saying, like we talked a lot about like the idea of like saving face and like lokani ki kana, like how do I, like people were worried about that. You spoke a little bit about that. How did you find, did you navigate that anyway? Like how was that navigated?
Honestly, it's very hard to navigate because as health professionals, even in general, you can't really tell people just stop worrying about what the society thinks, right? That's something I can say to a best friend in the moment, but at the end of the day, I personally myself care about what my community thinks of me as well, right? That social prestige, reputation is important in our community, and it's naturally embedded in us. So unless we came from a different culture, I think it's hard for us to not worry about what the rest of the society thinks, right? So that navigation was hard, but at the same time, just validation of feelings, affirmations, acknowledgement that, hey guys, you're not alone. And obviously I didn't do a whole lot of self-disclosure that's against my code of ethics, but at the same time, sometimes just letting them know, dude, I struggled with that too. Trust me, you're not alone, right? That's why, just to provide people that sense of peer support, we also started having a walking group. So we would weekly meet every Wednesdays at the clinic, like clients would show up and then do a walk, play cards with them, play carom boards, just these activities that, our community members usually enjoy, right? They just like to engage in, just so they feel a sense of community, they feel a sense of belonging, they just know that they're not struggling alone, right? So that helps, because when you go home, you're still going to worry about what the society thinks, but at that point you feel better knowing you're not the only one, right? Absolutely. If Baneet wants to add more.
Well, I think you covered it pretty well.
Yeah. And I think like what you said is like, I think you're right, and I think it's important to emphasize like caring about what other people think about is actually really important for you to be like intuitively kind to others. And like I actually do really care about what like my mom thinks of me because I want to make her proud, or I do care about what you two think of me in this room because I want to have a good relationship with you. So I think there's a lot of sacrifices people make to sustain relationships that is like so hard to navigate without like any tools for yourself when you're in this society. So like I know this, it's so funny because this podcast is about talking about addiction in the South Asian community, in Punjabi communities in like North America mostly, but I feel like it always comes down to like we do talk about this community perception like internally, like how we deal with that in our community, and then a bit about like how do like other people see our community and the saving face we do when we do that, right? So there's a big part of like, saving relationships that I think is really emphasized. And I think you can see, like, again, you see culture as a strength, but you also see it as like, oh, there's so many parts of it that I really struggle with.
Even just like the fact that drinking is so normalized in our culture, I think that's a huge one. I think any social event or any gathering we have revolves around alcohol. I think sometimes it's considered like out of respect asking someone if they want to drink, and like there's like that pressure that you need to have a drink, or to save this relationship or have a good relationship with this
Be
person.
a good host.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
like absolutely. And I think did you encounter that like with people who were coming to your clinic and then they were encountering like going to someone's wedding reception or going to someone's house? What were some things that maybe you talked to them about when navigating that?
So usually, like Baneet said, like drinking is so normalized, right? So when you go to somebody's house and they greet you with a shot glass or a glass of wine or a glass of drink, right? Now, my first question with that would be, when I had a client in a similar scenario would be, is drinking something they genuinely enjoy? If they are being invited to somebody's house for a party every weekend, is this something they genuinely enjoy, right? So most of the time they would say no. They would just rather stay home with their family, maybe once a month, once every 2 months. They would rather go out, right? Again, this is a very general statement. But at the same time, we have social obligations, right? So somebody invites you into their house. We invited them months ago, right? Now they've invited us. I can't say no. I have to go. You know what I mean? And we have a huge community. We have lots of family, friends, relatives, extended family. So the way we celebrate is by just getting together with them, right? That's why it's like let's say, I don't know, you win an award, right? It's not just you or your family, but our entire community wants to cheer us up because, oh my gosh, that's such a huge achievement. You know what I mean? So it's how like our families are how it's an occasion that brings all of us together, but at the same time, why do we have to drink, right? So it's on a surface level, like people usually knew I shouldn't be drinking this much, but when you're put on the spot and asked, hey, would you like a drink? How do I say no? So obviously we did talk about boundaries, the type of friends you associate yourself with, how maybe you can politely and gently say no without them being offended. But imagine you've been offered drinking in the same friend group for 10 years now. All of a sudden now you're just saying no, right? How are you going to be perceived, right? Again, perception, that fear of losing relationships, right? So
yeah. And how do you put those relationships, if you stop drinking in that relationship, there's going to be maybe a change in the way you interact. So that's something people definitely deal with.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of times, like, you're hanging with friends and like it revolves around drinking. So yeah. Or like if you're you choose not to drink, how are you going to deal with those cravings in that moment? How are you going to deal with people drinking around you? So, or just having like a plan in place for how to say no. Yeah.
And that was something, did you find that to be something people found success with, having a plan to how to say no, or what did that look like? I don't know. I'm just curious.
So obviously one of the plans, I'm just going to talk about this one situation I had. So we started about cutting down, right? So initially the client was struggling with it, but eventually did get to a point where he would, like, let's say, drink twice a week instead of 5 days. You know what I mean? And one of the things I had recommended was using alcohol intake tracker, like an app, something you could download, how much you're drinking and how, because then you can that way measure how much it's impacting your body, right? So after seeing that, he's like, okay, I'm actually more motivated to drink less now. And he really did progress after one point. But again, it's hard. It's hard. Change is hard in general, right? Absolutely. So this is me not saying it from a place of judgment. Change in general is really hard. So cutting down, again, takes a lot of work, takes a lot of motivation. Absolutely. And if you're providing for your family, you're likely working every day. If you work in construction, you're working probably over 10 hours, 12 hours. So when you want to come home, you just want to take a drink, relax and chill, and just go to bed so you can go to work properly the next day, right? So it's understandable why people do what they do.
Exactly. My favorite thing to say to anyone is like, tusi cha chad ke dekho. Like, try letting go of your caffeine intake or your sugar intake, it's quite difficult because your body is like, excuse me, I love this thing. And that's just one or two small substances that our bodies kind of react to, right?
Yeah. And I feel like when you think about it, right, we're just associating alcohol, substance use with addictions, right? But are there things that we like, that we eat in our day to day that are probably not healthy? For me, it's sugar.
Same.
Right? It's sugar. So, I'm telling you, like, no matter how much of cutting down I do, I always resort to my usual self, right? So it is hard. I get it.
Yeah. And I think like that is like what we're saying about like the community is like, how do we build like more supportive communities, is like maybe being like, yo, this is difficult. And how can we not, instead of pointing fingers at someone, being like, yo, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, or like, why
can't you just quit? Like giving them that like grace and understanding.
Yeah,
exactly. Record. So thank you so much for joining us today. Do we have any final thoughts for our episode?
Honestly, I would just encourage everyone to seek out help and support, because of, personally what I've seen. I know there's a lot of stigma out there. It's not easy to just come out and look for support. It's not easy because we all work hard, right? But at the same time, please do seek some support, because you're not alone. And all the issues, all the concerns that we have talked about in this podcast, that is to, obviously generate some awareness. That's why there might be reasons, but there might be reasons in terms of why you're struggling, but please do seek out support. That's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think to anyone that's struggling with addictions, just know that you're not alone. There's supports, there's resources available that you can reach out to, and we'll actually list them at the end in the caption or the info link as well.
Thank you for joining Saath, the Asra podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe or follow our social media at asra.now so you never miss an episode.
We would love to know what you think about today's episode. Please leave us a comment or send us a direct message. If you have any suggestions for future podcast guests, please fill out the Google form on our website or in the episode description. If you'd like additional information or resources in Punjabi or in English, please visit the ASRA website at www.asranow.ca. Thank you.